Lunchtime Lesson. So we're continuing our series with conditionals today, and we are going to be talking about mixed conditionals in this class. So if you remember, guys, we have already discussed the first conditional, the second conditional, and the third conditional in quite a lot of detail. We've discussed their pronunciation, how we use them. We've looked at alternatives to using them. We've talked about their frequency as well. If there's anything you don't remember about those, you can go and check out the previous videos. But today, we're going to look at this structure, which can cause so many problems and headaches for a lot of students. However, it doesn't really need to. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about mixed conditionals. And I think this is something that people think is a really complicated thing to produce, but it's not, right? So we're going to break it down today. I'm going to show you how to construct it, how you can use it, and when you can use it. And we'll do a bit of revision as well with pronunciation and so on. So the first point that I want to make, though, about mixed conditionals, this is a bit like the third conditional. Yeah, they're really not very common. Okay, it's not a structure that you're going to use in a normal conversation very often. Remember, like we said before, the most commonly used structure in your day-to-day English is going to be the first conditional and all of those alternative structures that we saw to the first conditional, like supposing, or like providing, or unless, or mixing them with those time clauses, like as soon as. Yeah, so they're the ones that really, for practical usage, you should be spending more time looking at. But these mixed conditionals, they are quite often considered what we'd say a more advanced grammatical structure, okay? Which means basically if you're doing an exam and you can produce one of those, you're going to get higher marks for them, yeah? So if your focus here is to pass your exam, it's definitely a good option. Okay, so we're going to look today at how to use them properly. So I've got 3 examples here. Can you please just have a look at those conditionals and tell me what kind of conditional they are? Yeah. If my parents hadn't met, I wouldn't have been born. If a meteor hadn't hit the Earth, dinosaurs wouldn't have become extinct. If my best friend had won the lottery last year, she'd have moved to a bigger house. Okay. So hopefully you'll identify these correctly. So remember to think about how possible these are. Is this a possible situation? Is this a hypothetical situation? When did that happen? Yeah. And hopefully you'll have identified that these are third conditional structures, right? So remember, when we use a third conditional, we're using them to talk about a hypothetical past situation. So something that did not happen. Yeah. That's why we use the third conditional. So let's go back to that one that was the example about the dinosaur. Yeah. Let's have a look at that example. So if a meteor hadn't hit the Earth, dinosaurs wouldn't have become extinct, right? But I could also, if I wanted to, I can also express what the hypothetical consequences of dinosaurs not becoming extinct, what that would have been on the present, okay? If the meteor had not hit the Earth, what would the hypothetical consequences of that be now? Okay. And if I wanted to say that, I could say if a meteor hadn't hit the Earth, dinosaurs might still exist now. Yeah, so I'm relating the second clause here to talk about the present. So if we have a look at the second clause here, our consequence clause, remember our conditionals always have a situation and a consequence. If we look at the structure that's being used in that clause here, you will hopefully identify that as a second conditional consequence clause. Yeah. Remember, here I've used might because that's an alternative structure when we're talking about our second conditionals. I could change might for would. Yeah, dinosaurs would still exist. Yeah. And this is what is a mixed conditional. Okay, that's it. It's a hypothetical past. And if you have a hypothetical past, that means logically that if you talk about the present, it'll be a hypothetical present result or consequence. Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking a hypothetical past, expressing this, which is the situation, using a third conditional structure, and then we express our consequence in the present or the future using a second conditional structure. So much easier than you think. Yeah. So like I say, here are some more examples, guys, if we are mixing our third and second conditionals. All right. So for example, if I had saved more money last year, I'd buy a new car now. Okay. So this situation is in the past. It's hypothetical. It didn't happen. I did not save money. This situation is in the present. It's hypothetical because I can't buy a new car because I did not save the money. Okay. If she hadn't met her husband in the past, she would still be single now. Okay. So if she hadn't met her husband, she did meet her husband. This is our hypothetical past situation. She would still be single now. Now she isn't single in reality. Yep, this is our hypothetical present. And if I say I would have more energy today if I hadn't gone to bed so late last night. Yeah. So last night I did go to bed late, and this morning I don't have much energy. Okay. We have our hypothetical result here, our consequence, and our hypothetical situation. Yeah. Okay. These are the ones we're expressing. Remember, situation with the third conditional structure, consequence with the second conditional structure. Do you remember as well that we can adapt our second conditionals with modal verbs and with adverbs to make it more interesting? Yeah, we talked about this in our second conditional class. So those examples that I just gave you, I could make them more interesting than I just showed you. For example, if I'd saved more money last year, I'd be able to buy a new car. Okay, so we'll bring in a modal verb here after would instead of can. If she hadn't met her husband, she might still be single. Okay, so remember that we can add these verbs of speculation like might or may or could to give the idea of how possible something would be. And I definitely have more energy today if I hadn't gone to bed so late last night. So remember, we can bring in adverbs like definitely and probably into those situation clauses again to add more speculation, to say how sure you are of something. And that will just immediately make your language a little bit more interesting, more varied, and showing that you have a wider range of both vocabulary and grammar. Okay. So let's try a few exercises. Here's the situation. Claire is tired. She was up late reading last night. So look at these three examples, and I would like you to identify which one is a mixed conditional. Yeah. If I hadn't stayed up late, I wouldn't have finished my book. I'd have more energy if I hadn't stayed up reading last night. And if I didn't read so much at night, I'd have more energy in the morning. Yeah. So hopefully you can see that that is our mixed conditional. Okay. So I'd have more energy now if I hadn't stayed up reading last night. So we have our hypothetical present, hypothetical past. Okay. If I hadn't stayed up late, I wouldn't have finished my book. Okay, is our normal third conditional. And if I didn't read so much at night, I'd have more energy in the morning is a normal second conditional. Hypothetical past, hypothetical present. Okay, the middles are mixed. Right, another example. Paul drove too fast. Now he's in trouble with the police. So if Paul drove more slowly, he wouldn't get in trouble with the police. If Paul hadn't driven so fast, he wouldn't have been in trouble with the police. If Paul hadn't driven so fast, he wouldn't be in trouble with the police. So hopefully you can identify that last one as your third conditional. Yeah, as your mixed conditional. The first one here is a second conditional. We're speaking hypothetically about the present. So Paul in general drives too fast. The second one, we're talking about the hypothetical past. Okay, and this is the one which mixes the two. And one last one for you here, guys. I didn't study a degree, so I can't get the job I want. If I'd gone to university, they'd consider me for the position. If I had a degree, I could get the job. If I had studied at university, I'd have more opportunities. Okay. So hopefully you'll identify our first one there as our mixed conditional. This one here is a second conditional. And our last one there is a third conditional. Remember as well, pronunciation is always really important with conditionals. And again, if you're doing an exam, it is brilliant if you can bring that pronunciation in, because it's showing knowledge of advanced phonological features, and it will increase your mark, okay? And the way that we pronounce a mixed conditional follows the same rules as if you were pronouncing a second or a third one, yeah? So let's see if we can remember what the pronunciation is that you have to use for second and third conditional structures, yeah? So remember, when we're talking about our second conditional, you have to think of contracting the word would, right? If I won the lottery, I would buy a car. That would become I'd buy a car, yeah? Now, remember, we talked about our contractions. We said in written English, you only contract on a pronoun. You would never do that in written English because it looks horrible. But in spoken English, we're always making that contraction, right? Because these are not content words. So it would sound like this. If she won the lottery, Claire would buy a car. Okay, so we need to keep that in mind when we're talking, when we're making our second conditionals. And if we're making the mixed conditional, that's also going to apply because your consequence clause will be expressed here. Okay, remember as well, if you're making questions, we have that would you. Okay, so with the you, this was a common example of expected speech. So what would you do? Yeah, that's where we're going to make our connected speech. Okay, so what would you do? What would you do if you had more money? Okay, it will sound like this, your block of sound. What would you do? Okay, and when we're talking about our third conditional, we've got all those auxiliaries that we have to bring together. So in a mixed conditional, this will be the place that you will be making more of your contractions because it's the situation clause that we're using. Yeah. So we have to make sure that that auxiliary had is the one that gets contracted. Okay. So we have that block of sound. Remember, not if I'd had, if I'd had, if I'd had. Okay. And here, this is what we would do in a normal third conditional. Remember that would and that have both contract. So the block of sound again would be I'd have gone. If we're doing a mixed conditional, I don't need to worry about that because there I'll have my second conditional, right? So I'd go, right? So if I'd had more time, I'd go to the shops. Thinking about how you can actually use a mixed conditional. Basically, if you want to increase your marks in exams, the same way that we saw with both second and thirds, mixed conditionals are brilliant ways to illustrate your arguments, okay? So they're great ways to make scenarios because you're speaking hypothetically, and they can be brought in really well into your essay writing, for example, or into your speaking. If you're doing a Cambridge exam, that would be part 3 of the IELTS, or if you're doing a Cambridge exam, that'll be part 4 with the discussion phase, and if you were doing an IELTS exam, that would be part 3, yeah, at the end. And that's a fantastic way that you can bring in those mixed conditionals, yeah. But like I said before, in your day-to-day English, they're really not going to come up very much. So if you're not planning to take any English exams, they're not really a piece of language I would personally spend a lot of time developing. But having said that, they are a really great pronunciation challenge. So it's worth practicing them, I think, just to develop your pronunciation techniques and really thinking about working with contractions and making blocks of sounds. And by working with them, it can also help you really consolidate your knowledge of both second and third conditional structures so that you can feel more confident moving forward and using those structures as well. Okay, so that's everything that we're going to talk about with mixed conditionals. In a few weeks, we're going to do a final session on conditionals, which is going to be just an overview of everything we've talked about as a little bit of revision. And until then, best of luck.